Just so you know, this show is about scary stuff. So don't say I didn't warn you guys. And remember, don't be scared.
Episode 141. The mission was death. The murders of Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan. War Baby here with another episode of Murderous Minors. Hey everyone. In some other news before we get to this week's case, Antonio Armstrong Jr. reported to prison to begin his sentence of 40 years to life on September 21st, 2023 and is now being housed at the Garza West Unit in Beeville, Texas. If you want to continue following that case, because it's not over by any means, local NBC affiliate KRPC2 covered it in depth and released an after-trial special episode of their show The Evidence Room entitled Sinner or Saint, which you can watch online and I've linked in the show notes. It includes an interview with Antonio Armstrong Sr.'s mother, who has the obvious double burden of being related to both the victims and their convicted murderer. This week, we'll be looking at a case that went viral with shocking video footage and which recently reached a conclusion: the successful prosecution and conviction of 17-year-old Mackenzie Shirilla for the high-speed vehicle crash deaths of her 20-year-old boyfriend Dominic Russo and his 19-year-old friend Davion Flanagan in Strongsville, Ohio. Her social media reflected a carefree teen who posted TikToks with captions like, "I'm not even cool, I'm just one of those girls that can do a lot of drugs and not die." Even though she was only 17 at the time of the crash, Dominic's family members said that the pair had dated for the previous 3 to 4 years and that Shirilla had lived with their family for much of that time. As far as her relationship with Davion, her mother called him a, quote, new friend when offhandedly referencing him while trying to defend her daughter's actions. But Davion's younger sister said that she had known her for about 3 years and that she was, quote, always taking the easy way out. Here's some background on the crash. Just after 5:30 a.m. on Sunday, July 31st, 2022, Shirilla was captured on security camera footage driving slowly with her signal on toward the intersection of Pearl Road and Alameda Drive in Strongsville, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland. She is then seen turning onto Alameda Drive. The video picks up as Shirilla drives down Alameda Drive toward Progress Drive, just before the road makes a sharp bend to the left, with her 2018 Toyota Camry accelerating so rapidly and violently that the car jerked from side to side and the airbags deployed as she reached 100 miles per hour or 160 kilometers per hour and ran up over the curb. Shirilla did not hit the brakes and there were no signs that she attempted to brake at all. She then bounced off a sign and slammed directly into the corner of a brick warehouse referred to as the Plidco building. The distance between her turn from Pearl to Alameda and the building is about 3/4 of a mile, which seems more than long enough for Dominic and Davion to figure out what was going on. Davion was just grabbing a ride home, sitting in the back, likely not comprehending the volatility of the situation he was in. I should say that right before they got in the car, they had spent the evening at a house party smoking marijuana, so they were all technically impaired, but it's still likely that Dominic and Davion realized exactly what was about to happen. Friends who were at that party spent all evening with the trio and said that they got along fine and that there didn't seem to be any tension between them, an observation that the defense would later point out. When someone finally found the aftermath of the collision some 45 minutes later, Davion Flanagan and Dominic Russo were already dead. Shirilla was the only one of the three who was still alive. When they were found, Shirilla's fuzzy Prada slipper was still tightly jammed to her car's gas pedal. In the pocket of her jacket, police found a scale and a bag of psilocybin mushrooms. What really made authorities feel like she had intentionally crashed her car to commit murder was her erratic behavior in the weeks before. Court records indicate that the pair had a toxic romance, rife with threats and fights that Dominic had even recorded. In the month of July 2022 alone, prosecutors said that the pair had several altercations, pointing to his cell phone videos that show her, quote, repeatedly degrading Dominic, threatening him, and damaging his property. The incident stemmed from his refusal to let her inside his house, which made her threaten to break the handle from his door and also to key his car. Just 2 weeks before Dominic and Davion were killed, prosecutors said that Dominic called his mother for a ride home while Shirilla was driving him down the highway erratically and threatening to crash her car. This remark was allegedly overheard by a family friend when he arrived to pick Dominic up, and he also claimed that he saw Shirilla, quote, striking Dominic with both of her hands. Dominic then exited the vehicle and left. Regarding that evidence, defense attorney Jim McDonnell said that, quote, I can't even fathom how somebody threatening to key a car equates to evidence that they're going to kill them. Her attorneys just didn't feel that the prosecution met their burden of proof, that they didn't present sufficient evidence that clearly proved that the crash was intentional. He asked the judge for a verdict not for murder, but for aggravated vehicular homicide. Prosecutors alleged that she had no reason to even be in that area and that she had even scoped out that very intersection a couple of days before the crash, and that the escalation of Shirilla's threats of violence against Dominic Russo ultimately culminated in her failed attempt at murder-suicide. But somehow she survived and fully recovered after a few weeks. Dominic Russo, who would have just celebrated his 22nd birthday on September 24, 2023, was the youngest of 7 kids, with one brother recalling that, quote, he was always the one who made us smile. He always had the biggest smile on his face. His oldest sister told People magazine that, quote, he was the most doting and proud uncle to our children. He was so loved and he is so incredibly missed. I'm so proud to call him my brother. He was driven when it came to his passions like fashion, they said, mentioning that he'd just started a clothing line in addition to having other fledgling businesses. He had a great sense of humor and was particularly finicky about always having nice shoes and socks. Dominic also had a love of music and was an aspiring singer-songwriter, something that he and Davion Flanagan bonded over. According to a GoFundMe started by his mother for a scholarship fund, Davion was, quote, a lifelong gifted athlete who was known for his infectious smile, kind heart, and fierce commitment to friends and family. The teen was starting running back on the Strongsville High School football team and was team barber. As a new young adult, he planned to attend all-state hairstyling and barber college, with aspirations of owning his own barbershop one day. He'd been adopted by the Flanagans when he was 8 years old, along with his 2 sisters who were 4 and 6. In her victim impact statement at Shirilla's sentencing, his mother said that, quote, Davion and my kids have had more than their fair share of heartbreak, of hardship, and of loss. Davion was adopted with his sisters from foster care. They are biological siblings. We are honored to have been chosen to be their parents, their forever family. So many dreams shattered, a future stolen. We will never get to see the amazing man that he was surely to become. His life was precious. Like I said, he was so much more than cargo. While Shirilla was in the hospital recovering, doctors said she was expressing, quote, grief, guilt, and shame about killing Dominic and Davion, which prosecutors later claimed showed consciousness of guilt, even though she claimed to have blacked out. Her attorney later said that any driver in a fatal crash may feel guilt, but that doesn't mean it's because they set out to commit murder. Shirilla has always maintained that she doesn't remember the crash, and she had texted Dominic's mother saying in part, quote, I remember turning onto the street and then my vision fades to black. It really kills me not being able to remember anything. I've been asking my therapist why I don't remember and she said it's because of trauma, but I'm going to try to get hypnotized and make myself remember. Then, when questioned by detectives and told that she was under criminal investigation, she asked if her license could be revoked for only 10 years instead of the lifetime ban she'd receive if convicted, which prosecutors claim showed intent. According to published photos, she was actually recovered enough by Halloween 2022 to dress up as a corpse and go out with her friends. She had also been seen at a concert. Shirilla's mother said when she was sentenced that any photos of her daughter between the murders and her arrest that show her out with friends were the only times she'd left her bedroom. The rest of the time, she said, Shirilla stayed in her room near a shrine she'd dedicated to Dominic's memory. She also posted many photos and comments under Dominic's online obituary, saying things like, quote, "I miss you, Nug. I still feel you're just gonna walk in the door any second. I miss your laugh, your perfect smile. God, you were the last person to deserve this. You had such a perfect life ahead of you. I wish I told you all this more. Please wait for me." It was the week after Halloween that she was arrested, on November 4th, 2022, and charged as an adult with 14 different crimes. By then, she had turned 18 years old. Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Michael O'Malley said that, quote, "The intent was obvious upon seeing that video, that there was only one goal, and the computer demonstrated that there was no attempt to slow down or stop, that it was full speed into a building, and tragically, it cost 2 people their lives. We put plenty of that sort of evidence in front of the judge. There is no doubt that this happened because of the relationship with Dominic, and the defendant's intent was clearly to end that, and she took everybody that was in the car with her." The defense pointed out several alternative explanations for the crash, like she was young and maybe just lost control of the car, saying that a detective had found 136 pictures in a folder labeled, quote, "reckless driving." They said that the car jerking back and forth possibly showed that she'd been driving fast but tried to regain control. They also tried to say that perhaps Shirilla fainted after her mother testified that about 3 years before the crash, her daughter had been diagnosed with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, a disorder which could make her pass out if dehydrated. In the end, he corroborated his client's blackout explanation by saying that, quote, "We are really never going to know what happened in that car, much less prove with evidence beyond a reasonable doubt." The judge did not buy that explanation at all, saying at Shirilla's sentencing later that a representative from the motor vehicle department had testified that, quote, "Not only did the defendant deny any medical condition when applying for her license, which her mother co-signed and attested to, but also that just after the accident, Mackenzie renewed her driver's license and again denied any medical condition." Ultimately, on August 14th, 2023, Shirilla was found guilty of 4 counts of murder, 4 counts of felonious assault, 2 counts of aggravated vehicular homicide, 1 count of drug possession, and 1 count of possessing criminal tools for the scale and the shrooms. She didn't testify on her own behalf. After she was found guilty, Davion's mother said that, quote, "We're just thankful that we feel justice was served today. There's not a day that goes by that we don't miss our son, and justice was served for him today. But honestly, there's no winners here. There's no winners here today." His father wrote on Facebook that, quote, "We do not seek vengeance, only justice for our son who was nothing more than an innocent passenger looking for a ride home." Shirilla had a bench trial and went before Judge Nancy Margaret Russo over a 4-day span in August 2023. She explained before she read her verdict that, quote, "In a bench trial, the judge sits as the jury and the finder of fact as well as the ruler of law. It is a reminder of just how difficult a job it is to serve as a finder of fact." She went on to say that, quote, "I have done what I'm sworn to do. I have carefully and deliberately considered all the evidence in this case, including the testimony of the witnesses, the science, the expert opinions offered, the medical evidence, the physical evidence, the photographs, and the video evidence. There is nothing that I can do or say today that will return these 2 young men to their families. There is nothing I can say or do that will restore Mackenzie Shirilla to the life she had before July 31st, 2022. This trial is the culmination of decisions made by one person, the defendant. Those decisions have forever altered the futures of 3 families, and of you also, Mackenzie, and your decisions forever robbed Dominic and Davion of the futures they had before them. If there's one thing that can be taken away from this case, as painful as it is this. Every decision we make is important. Every action we make is important. Regardless of whether the decision is a good one or a bad one, or the actions are good or not, the result is the same. The consequences of that decision ripple through time and affect many more people than one might think at the time of the decision. In criminal cases, the state carries the greatest burden under our law. As I previously stated, I considered all the evidence presented, and at this point, I would like to comment specifically on Exhibit 802, the crash video. This is the type of evidence you can never unsee. You can never forget the video or audio of this exhibit. It is chilling and tragic. The video clearly shows the purpose and intent of the defendant. She chose a course of death and destruction that day. Exhibit 802 crystallizes the deadly decision-making of the defendant. She morphs from a responsible driver to literal hell on wheels as she makes her way down the street. She had a mission and she executed it with precision. The mission was death. This was not reckless driving, this was murder. Before her sentencing, Dominic's father said, quote, "It's horrible for everybody. Yeah, I lost my son. It's harder on our family, but I don't want the rest of her life ruined too. It isn't going to make me feel any better. She's just a little kid. She fucked up. She did a damn stupid thing, but now her parents are destroyed. Her family's destroyed too. I wish there was a way she could get some kind of help, some kind of treatment." Judge Russo did not hold back at all when handing down her sentence on August 21st, 2023, saying, quote, "Today is the sentencing of the defendant for the purposeful and intentional murders of Davion Flanagan and Dominic Russo, and in a way it's the second time their families are gathered together to grieve. It's also a day when Mackenzie's family will grieve the future of their daughter. All three of these families and the friends of these families are suffering, and all of their lives have been irrevocably changed because of the actions of the defendant. The unintended and collateral consequences of a selfish, intentional, cruel decision by Mackenzie will ripple forever in time. It's literally changed history because it's ended 2 lives. 2 young men are dead. Their deaths were horrible, terrifying, and tragic. I will say again, if any reasonable person reviews Exhibit 802, there can be no doubt in your mind what happened this night. There can be no doubt of the absolute terror of the 2 people in that car. The defendant controlled all of the events. She chose the day. Specifically, she chose a day just before her 18th birthday. She chose to drive a car, the time to drive the car. She chose an obscure, previously scouted route through an industrial parkway. She chose the target to hit and the victims. She chose the means and the method to follow through. And she planned and purposefully executed the events of July 31st, 2022. The review of the evidence supports the factual findings. The judge went on to say that, quote, "There was no medical condition that caused this as an accident. There was no mechanical failure of the car. The record was clear on the facts and the evidence. Her mother's uncorroborated statements without any medical testimony or records is not persuasive." It's also important to remember that even if Mackenzie intended to also die in this crash, that is irrelevant. A failed suicide attempt is not a defense to murder. And even in a murder-suicide attempt, when the perpetrator executing the plan survives, the other death or deaths are still murdered. There's only one person responsible for the pain of everyone in this room, and that person is you, Mackenzie. Nobody else is responsible. The judge was totally aware that she may receive pushback on her decision, saying that, quote, "I'm troubled that should I give you a concurrent sentence that people will believe that I'm somehow being disrespectful to one of the victims, and on the other hand, I have to weigh the punishment. There's a very good likelihood that you, Mackenzie, will spend the rest of your life in prison. That won't be up to me. I understand that the pain in this room wants me to impose the harshest sentence, but I don't believe that would be the appropriate sentence because I do believe that Mackenzie will not be out in 15 years. So she's sentenced on count 2, the murder of Davion Flanagan, 15 years to life. She's sentenced on count 1, the murder of Dominic Russo, 15 years to life, to be served concurrent to each other. Soon after, Dominic's older sister told People magazine that, quote, "There's a huge hole in us all. We will never be whole again. I feel like the sentences should have been run consecutively. I can't imagine how I would feel if Mackenzie got out in 14 years. My brother's life and Davion's life was completely stolen. They don't get out in 15 years. They don't come back in 15 years. They don't get any chance to live a life. About a month after Shirilla was sentenced, Davion's parents spoke to thedailymail.com about her, calling her, quote, self-centered, selfish, and narcissistic, after saying that she should, quote, just admit what you did and apologize, then start to change. Mackenzie Shirilla is housed at the Ohio Reformatory for Women in Marysville, Ohio, serving concurrent sentences of 15 years to life. She will be eligible to apply for parole in 2037. Once again, thanks for listening, and until next time, don't be scared.